Love has no age, but sometimes the conditions to start a relationship can make you want to walk away immediately. Today, you are going to hear a true story. It may sound lighthearted at first, but it has left many older adults speechless just a few minutes in. A 67-year-old man who once experienced a fulfilling marriage and had been living in loneliness for many years, finally opened his heart to meet a 55-year-old woman in a hopeful blind date. But after just 4 unexpected conditions she laid out, he had to stand up and leave, walking away from a cup of tea that had not even cooled down, and leaving behind a lingering question in the minds of many. Is love in old age becoming too complicated? This story is not just about a failed date. It is a mirror reflecting loneliness, hidden fears, and the misunderstandings that leave so many older adults struggling in their journey to find a soulmate. Were those requirements unreasonable? Or were they simply protective layers covering a heart that has once been broken? And if it were you, someone looking for love in the twilight years of life, how would you respond? Before we dive into the details, I would love for you to do one small but meaningful thing. Leave a positive affirmation in the comment section. Something like, "I deserve to be loved at any age," or any heartfelt wish you want to send to the life ahead. And do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you will not miss out on more emotional stories and powerful life lessons about love life and kindness in our later years. Stay with me until the end of the video, because what you are about to hear might just change the way you see love in old age, forever. Behind that decision to walk away was not anger or a momentary hurt, but the long story of a man who carried his lonely heart in search of a hand that could truly understand. Thomas, 67 years old, lives in a peaceful little town out west in the United States. After retiring, he spent most of his time in a cozy wooden house that had once been a warm home for him and his wife for over 30 years. But now, it is just him, alone with quiet memories that return every evening as the sun goes down. His beloved wife, Linda, passed away from cancer. She was his life partner, his confidant, the one who stood by him through every twist and turn of life. Their marriage was never flashy. It was made of little things, sharing coffee every morning, watching the evening news together, and sometimes just holding hands in peaceful silence. Since she left, the house remained the same, but the space felt completely different, empty, quiet, and colder than any winter he had ever known. Thomas has 2 grown children who live in other states. They love their father, still call him, often send gifts on holidays, but they cannot fill the space that only a life companion can occupy. He does not blame them. That is just how modern life works. Everyone is busy. Everyone has their own world to live in. Financially, Thomas is stable. His monthly pension and savings are enough to live comfortably without worry. But he understands one thing well. Financial independence does not mean emotional independence. Because sometimes in front of a dinner table with only one plate, or on a weekend with no one to talk to, his heart starts to grow, silent. That is why, after months of thought, Thomas decided to open his heart once more. He signed up for a dating event for older adults, not to pass the time, but to find a true companion. Someone not just to make him feel less lonely, but to make him feel connected, seen, heard, and understood. Something every person at any age deeply longs for. And so, on that afternoon, Thomas walked into a coffee shop where he would meet the woman, the one who gave him a spark of hope, and also the reason he had to turn and walk away. Her name was Susan, 55 years old. From the very first glance, she made a strong impression. She was striking in a quiet, experienced way. Lightly silvered hair, a confident smile, and eyes that did not look away. Susan had the presence of someone who had been through loss, someone who knew what she wanted and was not afraid to say it. She had been in a nearly 2-decade-long marriage before divorcing. Susan spoke about it calmly, without bitterness or sorrow. as if that chapter had been carefully folded and placed away in the drawer of memory. Her honesty made Thomas feel at ease. He appreciated clarity. It made everything simpler, especially at this stage in life when there is no time left for mind games or hiding feelings. They talked like two old friends who happened to run into each other after years apart. She shared her love for gardening, her interest in reading philosophy, and her beliefs about life after retirement. Thomas nodded along the entire time, not out of politeness, but because he genuinely related. For almost an hour he felt he was connecting with someone deep, warm and strong, someone rare and worth appreciating. But then, like a sudden shift in a beautiful song, Susan changed the tone of the conversation. With a calm voice and unblinking eyes, she began listing 4 conditions. Not romantic wishes, but specific, direct requirements, almost as if she was laying out a prenuptial agreement. "I want us to live together for the first 3 months as a trial," she said. "But before that, I need you to transfer a financial commitment. Not a lot, just enough to give me peace of mind that you are serious." The words hung in the air, cutting through what had seemed like a warm and promising conversation. Susan said it gently, without a hint of demand. She even smiled when she mentioned the phrase, financial commitment. But to Thomas, that smile could not ease the strange feeling rising in his chest. He tried to stay calm, took a sip of coffee, and asked for clarification. "You mean, I have to pay up front to prove that I am serious about this relationship?" Susan nodded, as if it was the most reasonable thing in the world. In that moment, something inside Thomas quietly shattered. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough to shake him deeply. It was not about the money. He had enough. What hurt him was this: the relationship had barely begun. There was not yet enough trust. And he was already being asked to prove himself with money. To him, love should not start with a deposit. Money can buy convenience, but it cannot buy the feeling of being understood, of leaning on someone when life gets heavy. He had not come here to have his bank account tested. He came to find someone who could sit next to him in silence and still feel connected. "And I need one more thing," Susan added. "Even if we do try living together, I want separate bedrooms, separate beds. I value my privacy, and I need time to feel safe." Thomas looked up a bit surprised. That was not what he had expected to hear in a relationship that was supposed to begin with sincerity. For him, sleeping separately was not a deal breaker. He respected personal boundaries, and he did not expect physical closeness right away. What confused him was the way Susan said it, as if there would always be an invisible wall between them, built not to protect love, but to keep it from growing. In Thomas's mind, love at this age is no longer about passionate displays like in youth. It is about connection, holding hands on a walk, sitting next to each other, watching an old movie, hearing the steady breath of the person beside you in the morning. Those little things to him were intimacy, simple but deeply meaningful signs of a real relationship. The idea of living under the same roof yet staying apart in different rooms made him feel like a tenant, not someone truly invited into another's life. That feeling did not come from selfishness, but from a deep sadness. If love is kept outside the door, how can it ever be given the chance to grow? Thomas began to sense something was off. He did not oppose caution, and he certainly did not dismiss the pain this woman had been through. But he was no longer sure if he could build something lasting, if the relationship was already being defined by distance from the very beginning. "I have always dreamed of wearing a wedding dress at least once in my life," Susan said, her eyes lighting up slightly as she shared what seemed like a sweet and innocent wish. "If things go well, I want us to take a 1-month trip, somewhere warm like Florida or California. And we will take wedding photos there. I will plan everything. You just need to cover the costs." Thomas smiled softly when he heard the words, wedding dress. Something tender and bittersweet stirred in his heart. At this age, it is rare for someone to still hold on to such romantic dreams. But the more he listened, the slower his smile became. A 1-month trip. It sounded fun. Wedding photos, nothing too extravagant. But what made him pause was the way everything was laid out. She would plan and he would pay. It felt as though the roles had already been assigned. And he was not a partner, but a sponsor. Thomas had no issue with sharing expenses. To him, love means giving freely and naturally. But what he needed was participation, the feeling of building something together, not being cast into the role of financial provider for a dream already written without him. The more he thought about it, the more things felt off. A trip should begin with a question like, "Where would you love to go?" or with two people leaning over a map together, excitedly picking hotels. But in this case, everything seemed scripted. And his role? No lines, just sign the check. A quiet stillness settled in Thomas's heart. Not because he was reluctant to spend money, but because he missed the feeling of starting something that truly belonged to both people. If every plan came from just one side, how could love find the space to breathe? And finally, Susan continued, her voice steady, like she was reading out a financial proposal. "If after 6 months we feel ready for marriage, I want you to hand over your pension card. I will manage the spending so everything stays reasonable and secure. You will have a personal allowance each month. Not much, but enough for your needs." Thomas said nothing. Not because he was shocked, but because he was trying to understand what was really happening in a meeting he had once placed so much hope in. He was not a conservative man. He had shared finances with his wife for over 30 years of marriage. They never needed to talk too much about money, because they trusted each other. But now he felt as if he had been placed in a lower position, not a life partner, but someone who needed to be managed. The idea of handing over full control of his finances to someone he had just met a few hours ago sent a chill down his spine. Not because he was afraid of losing money, but because he feared losing his independence. At this age, Thomas was not looking to be dependent. He was looking for someone to walk beside him, not someone to make every decision for him, even down to how much he could spend each month. What hurt him most was not the request itself, but the attitude. Susan said it like it was the most natural thing in the world, as if this were the only way to prove commitment. But for Thomas, marriage, even one that begins late in life, still needs mutual trust. It cannot be built on one-sided control. He felt as though he was being pushed out of the role of a capable, experienced man, a man who had once carried the responsibilities of a family provided for his children, now being reduced to an old man on an allowance like a child. That feeling broke his heart, not out of pride, but because he realized that if love begins with power dynamics and control, then it is no longer a partnership, but a negotiation, where the loser is the heart. The meeting ended without a handshake, without any promises. All that remained was the sound of Thomas's footsteps leaving the cafe, slow but heavy with disappointment. On the way home, he did not feel angry or hurt. What he felt most clearly was emptiness. Not because he had been rejected or failed, but because he had genuinely believed that this time, it could be a new beginning. A small chance to no longer drink tea alone, to have someone by his side while listening to an old song, or simply watching the first snowfall of the season together. But what he had heard made him feel as if love, something that should be about sharing and companionship, was now surrounded by conditions, rules, and control. That was not what he was searching for, and it certainly was not something a once broken heart could endure again. In that quiet moment, he slowly sat down on a familiar stone bench near the park, the one he always visited in the late afternoons. A gentle breeze passed through, carrying the scent of dry grass and the distant hum of life going on. He closed his eyes and let his feelings flow like a stream. "I want to love," he he thought to himself, not be wounded again. It was not a pessimistic thought. It was clarity, a realization that at this age, love needs to be built on warmth, not fear, on trust, not control. And if he could not find love like that, he would rather choose solitude, but solitude in peace, not forced closeness in a wrong relationship. Thomas's story is not unique. It is just one small piece in a much bigger picture, where love in old age is often tangled in unconscious games called self-protection and control. From another perspective, the conditions Susan laid out, while they seemed rigid, are not entirely unusual in the world of senior dating. Many people at this age, after experiencing heartbreak, loss, or betrayal, often choose to protect themselves with clear boundaries, specific conditions, and even financial commitments. They are afraid of being taken advantage of, afraid of giving without receiving, afraid of being hurt one more time. But the paradox is that those very shields, though built with reasonable intentions, can unintentionally push the other person away. Instead of building trust, they create the feeling of standing before a contract, not an open heart. Some people even approach love in old age with pure practicality. They no longer believe in emotions. They simply look for financial stability, a secure companion, or long-term benefits. But when love becomes a calculation, when romance is replaced by demands, what remains is compromise. Without connection, without true emotional bond. Love in the twilight years does not need to be intense or filled with dramatic vows. It just needs tenderness, subtlety, listening, and understanding. It needs space where both people can simply be themselves, respected for their habits, their way of life, and the pain they still carry from the past. That does not mean abandoning personal boundaries or sacrificing unconditionally. It means finding a way to love that fits, where no one feels controlled and no one feels the need to doubt. Love in old age, if carefully nurtured, may not be loud, but it can be the most lasting and profound kind of love. Her name is Margaret. She is 72 years old and has been widowed for over 15 years. During a date with a man she met through a senior dating program, Margaret clearly laid out her financial expectations. If the two were to move forward, she wanted a clear agreement on sharing living expenses, keeping separate personal assets, and having equal decision-making power over individual matters. The man sat quietly, a bit surprised. In that moment, many people might have thought she was being calculating, cold, or lacking trust. But if you listened more closely to her story, everything would appear differently. Margaret had once been deceived by her second husband after remarrying. He tricked her into signing over her assets, then left her for another woman, leaving her with nothing. Since then, she made a promise to herself never again would she let her heart overrule her mind. To her, loving someone did not mean giving everything away. She still longed for love, for someone to hold her hand through the remaining days of life. But in order to open her heart again, she needed strong boundaries, not to keep others out, but to keep herself safe within. Sometimes what may sound like strange or excessive requests are actually traces of past heartbreaks, and someone who is patient and thoughtful will not stop at surface-level behavior. They will look deeper, into the places where old wounds have not yet healed, where the person in front of them is not trying to be difficult, but simply trying to stay protected. True love is not about erasing each other's pasts, but about making space for that past to exist, without harming the present. And that only happens when both people choose to see each other with understanding, not judgment. Stories like those of Thomas and Margaret are not meant to be listened to and forgotten. They carry messages for all of us, especially those still searching for love no matter our age. If you are on a journey to find love, begin with sincerity. Do not rush. Do not try to force an outcome too soon. Love is not a negotiation, and it is certainly not a test through a series of conditions. Open your heart. Share your true self. That is the only solid foundation for any relationship, especially at this stage of life. If you are someone who has been hurt before, remember the past may leave scars, but it should not become chains that hold your future hostage. What you have been through has made you stronger, but do not let it take away your ability to trust again. Maybe you no longer love like you did in your 20s, but you can still love in a more peaceful and mature way. If you are loving someone older, the most precious thing you can offer is not a fancy gift or flowery words. It is patience. At this age, people love quietly but deeply. They carry a past, have their own principles, their own fears, but they also have a heart full of warmth waiting to be understood. Know that emotions in later life are not simpler. They just need more care. And no matter who you are at any age, always remember, everyone needs love and deserves the chance to love. Do not let doubt, judgment, or fear steal away the relationships that could become the most beautiful part of your remaining years. Love in old age does not need to shine like fireworks. It just needs to be warm enough, like a candle in a cold night. Just enough to warm two hearts that have weathered so many storms. Just enough to remind each other we still have a chance, if we are brave enough to open our hearts. Thomas's story is not just about a failed date. It is a gentle reminder to all of us that love always needs sincerity, but it also needs deep understanding. Do not let old wounds blur new chances, and do not let conditions, even those born out of fear, turn love into a test where both people feel lost. If you are standing at the doorway of a relationship, unsure whether to step forward or turn back, listen to yourself. Choose love, but choose the kind of love that lets you be yourself, not a love built on fear or control. What do you think about Thomas's story and the conditions that seem so unreasonable? Have you ever experienced something similar? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because who knows, your story might inspire someone who is still searching for the courage to love again. And if this video brought you something meaningful, do not forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that could touch your heart. Let us build a positive space together, a space where age does not stop love, but makes it deeper. See you again in the next story.